Welcome back to chapter 8 of our Revelation commentary. We'll be beginning here in verse 1, talking about the seventh seal.
This is going to be in chapter 8. Just to kind of recap a little bit, we ended off in the last chapter where it was talking about the 144,000 being sealed. And then it talked about the Great Tribulation and some of the stuff that's going on. Now we're down to the last seal, the last seventh seal. And chapter 8 verse 1, it starts off.
And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour.
Now, if you didn't know the rest of what's coming up here, you'd think, well, that's all the seventh seal was about. It was just silence for 30 minutes. But as we read on down through here, we find out that this is not the end of the seventh seal. Verse 2 talks about.
And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne.
In verse 2, it talks about there that these angels, there were 7 of them, and they were all given a trumpet, but they just didn't do anything with them. They were just kind of given their instrument, and there they are. And verse 3 and 4 and 5 is actually the ending of the 6th seal. And so in verse 3 it talks about that that there was another angel that came and stood at the altar, and he had a golden censer in his hand. So a censer is kind of like a pot. You've seen them kind of wave these things around, smoke coming out of it. That's a censer. And there was given unto him much incense. That means a whole lot of let's smell this stuff and go before God. It smells good, incense. That he should offer it up with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. Now we start putting this together here. In verse 1 it talks about in the 7th seal, and there was space in heaven about the space of half an hour. And some folks think, well, it may be when the rapture's happening. It very well could be. But we do know what's happening there is the rest of 3, 4, and 5. They're standing there in awe of watching this angel and what he's doing. And also, he's offered up incense and with the prayer of all the saints. I kind of like that. You know, this is a time period in here where we're not on our own, but all the prayers are being offered up right now. It's going to be uncorked then,
Right.
when we're going to need them. I think a lot of times some of the stuff that I've gone through in my life, that I've been kind of protected by some of that because of my grandmother's prayers and my mother's prayers. And
That's right.
some other folks didn't think I was going to make it. And so all the prayers with the golden altar, which was before the throne. You know, we've talked about that. We keep talking about all this stuff that's before the throne. Well, now we got another piece of furniture thrown in there, and it's a golden altar there. So it looks like to me it's getting pretty crowded out front of that throne. I'm just saying. It's just what the scripture says. And this probably not no just itty bitty, you know.
And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand.
So here, once again, it reiterates the fact that there was a smoke, there was the incense going up, and it went up with the prayers of the saints. I like that. I know I need all the prayer I can get. My wife seems to think that I don't get quite enough. I'm still running behind.
And the angel took the censer, and filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth. And there were voices, and thunderings, and lightnings, and an earthquake.
This right here, at the end of the seals, the trumpets, and the vials, they all end the same. And it ends off with this terminology here, which talks about voices, and thunderings, and lightnings, and an earthquake. In Revelation chapter 11, and verse 19, it's over here just a page or two. This is the ending of the trumpets. What we just read was the end of the seal. When we talk about trumpets, I mean the thunder and earthquake stuff. Verse 19 of chapter 11 says, And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings, and voices, and thunderings, and an earthquake, and great hail. So it's saying the same thing again right here at the end of the trumpets. So when we turn to the vial, that's Revelation chapter 16 In verse 18, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake, and so great. So we see right here at the end of the seal, the trumpets, and the vials, they all come to the same conclusion. And you know, and there's all this here catastrophic stuff that's happening. You anything to add to that?
Sounds like we better get ready for an earthquake.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a big one. There'll be some great hail too. When we think about that, another place it talks about that the hail it weighed a talent, which is about 100 pounds. Well, that's going to do you windshield in, you know.
And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the 3rd part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up.
So this is the first trumpet that sounded, and what we see is depiction of what a lot of people would say happened during World War I. And that's the way I've been taught these trumpets, so that's the way I'm going to say it today, is that we believe the first trumpet was World War I because of the fact that biological weapons were used, and they used a lot of trench warfare, fire mingled with blood, and those type things. It's when airplanes were first used and started casting bombs down to the earth. And also they had a scorched earth policy that if they had to retreat, they just burned everything in sight. So if there's going to be a major trumpet sound, that's going to have to be a point where we can nail it down and define it. That's why we believe that it was World War I.
You know, you would think that each one of these angels sounded off here, it's going to have to be a major world event to ever even be mentioned in the scriptures. So we pretty well know in verse 10 where it talks about the 3rd angel and Chernobyl and all that, we can kind of pinpoint that. So these others would happen before that. So it does stand to reason, you know, it would have been World War I and II and so forth down through there. I'd also like to point out the fact here that it talks about each one of these, it's a third of this and a third of that, except for the grass, and burned all that up. But everything else, it seems like it's a third and a third and a third, and that's a pattern that goes through these trumpets.
Yes, so now we begin talking about the 2nd angel.
And the 2nd angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the 3rd part of the sea became blood. And the 3rd part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the 3rd part of the ships were destroyed.
And as we just mentioned before, we were talking about that a major event would make sure that it made it in the Bible. And in World War II, it's been calculated that 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. All the ships that had been participating in that war were killed. Well, another thing too is that whenever the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan, you can imagine if you're sitting up there in the airplane and all of a sudden you drop that bomb, you don't see nothing, probably hardly but water, and all of a sudden, boom, big fire cloud. It would look like a mountain burning with fire coming out of there. So if we stick with the whole what is depiction and what is not being in the book of Revelation here, it makes sense that the fire cast into the sea would be the atomic bomb. And we do know that 1/3 of the ships were destroyed, and there's no way of calculating whether or not 1/3 of the fish died, but you can only imagine all the torpedoes and everything else that's been exploding, and the ships exploding and this and that. I'm sure it's probably pretty
not to mention all that atomic whatever getting in the water. You know, what catches me there in verse 9 where it does talk about a 3rd part of the ships were destroyed. Well, that makes you think about there. This is some kind of war situation. You know, you're not going to be talking about a fishing boat or anything like that out there. I mean, this is talking about ships.
So, yeah, and that's what destroys ships.
And the 3rd angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the 3rd part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the 3rd part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter.
And as we had mentioned before, this word Chernobyl, translated in the English, in the Russian language, means wormwood. So the Bible mentions wormwood, but that word equivalent in Russian is Chernobyl. Well, we know that the Chernobyl nuclear accident was one of the biggest nuclear explosions that has ever been. And because of that, there's an unpopulated area. Right after that, when it blew that cloud straight in the air, it rained for like several days afterwards, which got into the soil, it got into the water, it got into everything, and killed a lot of animals, killed a lot of people. And the bad thing about it is it's still in the process of doing that, because anybody that drank of those waters that had that nuclear explosion waste in it, they will most likely develop cancer.
Yeah, talking about the half-life of it, and that means, that it's going to get on out in there and still do some damage. So all the effects from that have not been dealt with yet. There's still some stuff coming. And like you said, a lot of the animals and stuff, they actually had to kill them because they already had radiation in them, and to keep them from getting cancer, and they wasn't fit to eat no more, and they just had to kill them.
That's pretty sad. They had to kill all the animals, and a lot of men died during the putting out that fire. And like I said, I think we still haven't seen all the repercussions of that yet.
It's still going to be going on from now in a few more years, and it'd really be kind of hard to say, well, they died from that, but they were around that when that happened, so it's a good possibility.
Right. So we'll be concluding here.
And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld, and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe! Woe! Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound.
So at the sounding of the fourth trumpet, we see that it seems as if time had speeded up. And, I think time speeds up every day that I live, and it gets faster and faster and faster for me. But, it's talking about not part of the sun not shining, this not shining. So I don't think it's necessarily the length of day as much as it just is all accelerating faster. Because if it were not for that, Jesus said himself, if the days not be shortened, then basically no flesh is going to survive. So I think God, when he sounded this trumpet, he just started speeding these things up. And it seems like with every technology, with every invention, with all that we get, it just goes faster and faster and faster.
We're already halfway through this year, and we just got started.
Just got started. I mean, it doesn't seem like it should be this far in. And even the things that have already happened in the short amount of time since the election and things like that have just flown by. And, things we were talking about 2 years ago seem like ancient history now.
It does. When in that verse 12, a third of this, a third of that, and a third of something else, there's a lot of thirds in there.
Yeah. We're going to have
crank that out again.
We see a consistent third going through. And verse 13 talks about the next trumpets that are to sound. So woe, woe, woe. So each trumpet gets a woe. Mm-hmm. Hey man, slow down a little bit.
Woe sounds bad, don't it?
Whoa, yeah, whoa. And if an angel's saying whoa, it's probably got to be pretty bad. Because I'm sure they've seen some stuff, And the worst part about that, it says, to the inhabitants of the earth. That's us. Telling us, well, I'm sorry for y'all. Shaking your head.
It's just definitely a warning of what's getting ready to come up, and it's probably not going to be good.
No, it's not. Anything to add or conclude about this?
Well, any of this end time stuff, when you start reading it, it seems like it's just one bad thing right after another. There's not really a whole lot of good in there to be talked about, other than the fact like prayers and some of that is some positive stuff that we've got some hope going through there. But I think we're into some of this stuff, and sometimes like we're talking about these here trumpets, some of this happened during World War I and II and all that. We've been in some of this end time stuff for several years already and haven't realized it. And here where it talked about like a third of whatever got destroyed and this and that. Well, we're talking about over 70, 80 year period. So it's had time to replace itself. So we go along in here and it says another third or something. Well, that's done grew back or repopulated or whatever. It's not like bam, bam, bam. And all of a sudden we're running out of people or we're running out of something else.
Right.
That's just something to keep in mind that this happened over several decades.
That's the conclusion of chapter 8. We reiterated that chapter 8 started with the seventh seal, which we had went over in chapter 6. Then we had the interlude chapter of the 144,000 sealed. Now we just reviewed the seventh seal, and in that seventh seal we see that the 7 trumpets are there. And like we had said before, that doesn't mean that they were just now handing out the trumpets at that, at the 7th seal. There are parallel stories, as we've known, that World War I, World War II, the Chernobyl accident, and then the Berlin Wall falling, speeding up the time, leading us into the New World Order, in the 4th trumpet there. And so we'll be able to talk about the 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets when we return the next time.
That's it.
Thank you guys for joining us.